3, 3, 2, 1. What's up, fam? It's your boy Demuir here, purveyor of all sounds underground. Thank you for joining me on my YouTube channel today, where I'll be exploring part 2 of Scalar 2 review by Plugin Boutique. I am super excited about this product, and what this video will be all about is just to show you my interpretation of bringing this into my particular workflow. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the schematic of the plugin because there's a lot going on in it, but I'm going to try and break it down in a way that just gives you an understanding of how I would use it in my workflow as a sample heavy bass producer in underground electronic music. But before we jump into the details, what I need from you is that SLC. Hit subscribe, like, comment, and more importantly, hit the notifications bell to stay in touch with the new videos that we have up and coming. We post 2 of these each week for your perusal. All right, so let's jump right into this thing, and the first thing I'm going to talk about is the layout. And if you're happening to catch this video without watching part 1 of it, I highly recommend that you do so, because I just talk about, you know, what the product is, what's behind it, and so forth. And here we're actually showing the practical use of the plugin when it comes to my particular workflow in my studio here. All right, so let's just talk about the layout specifically. When I first used this product in our first video, I used it as a MIDI effect, and in here I'm using it as an audio unit. So as a result of that, you could see that there are just a number of instruments in here. Everything from electric piano, like I said in my last video, to, you know, different synth sounds. There's acoustic guitars, there's hybrid instruments, more orchestral instruments, and there's bass instruments as well, which is pretty cool because, as I said in my last video, there is a bass mode which offers up, when you figure out the chord progression, it gives you a suggestion as to how you should start out writing the bass line based on, I guess, the root notes of each of the chords. But anyway, those are all of the instruments I was alluding to in the first video. So all the instruments are there for use. All right, so you have the detection of MIDI notes, tells you what chord is going on, and you'll see this in the MIDI effects mode, and I might be able to show that later, but those pieces appear here. And then once you have your chords, after you imported whatever you wanted to detect, whether it's MIDI or audio, you can tell Scalar 2 how you want those chords to be performed. And there's a plethora of different modes. I'm not even going to try and pronounce a lot of these, but sempre, I know, I don't see it. Oh yeah, these are a lot of classical terms in terms of, you know, how the chords will be played back in its performance. And then you get into phrases, like, so do you want it to go based on a scale phrasing or just pure chord, well, which is pretty cool. And you have keys lock here, which admittedly I haven't delved into as much because I just got this a couple of days ago. But scaling to notes mapped, that just makes sense to me. I just want to see each of the notes that are engaged in the chord, and it seems to be how it plays out, but I may be wrong in that. I'm not perfect. I haven't explored it in full. And then you have voice groupings, which is really cool. You could choose different ways in terms of how it's played, each of the chords. So for example, you can have an E major 7 chord, but the root note, like the E, the lowest note, you could skip over an octave and it's playing slightly below, and while the other chords are maybe 1 or 2 octaves higher to make the complete chord. This is really cool, and I just recommend you fool around with this serendipitously, because I think you'll discover new things. Humanizing is really, really, really cool. And I showed this a bit in my last video where I was tapping the one chord, and you could see it changing the velocity of certain notes within the chord. So as it progressed, you could see, okay, it hit the E note a bit harder in the first stab of the chord, and then in the third stab of the chord, it played it a little differently in terms of the velocity. And you could go with timing, and you could say leverage both timing and velocity to humanize it, and it's absolutely true. That's what happens. And then there's a bunch of quantizing options, which I thought was really cool. So you can make this as close to a real person playing whatever chord progressions you detect and discover as a result of using this tool as humanly as possible, which is cool. I think the way I'm going to opt to use this is once it shows me the notes, I'm going to go over here to my keyboard and just learn them, and that way I absorb it and play it my own way. But it's nice that it's offering up a lot of tweaks for those that are not necessarily comfortable with playing chords on their own, or they're just totally inside the box. They've never played an instrument and they're used to drawing chords out. So this is great in order to help humanize what's happening. Off to, let's click the gears here. So these are the settings, and this just talks very specifically to how you want to set things up in terms of the overall setup. So I've already gone in and just set up a couple of key things. Like the sound I like to load up is the electric piano for what I do. When it comes to expressions and how it hears and detects things, I like to use the latch mode, and I just want the chords to play only. I don't want any crazy other stuff going on. I just want to see the chord, I want to know what key I'm in, and I want to see the scales. But you can make this what you want it to be in terms of the default settings that I showed you up at the top. So that's what that is. And then you have other preferences you can get into, as well as this session mode, which I haven't explored deeply yet, but it's all there underneath the settings for you to make this your own, which is just lovely. So you have the main mode here. Then this is edit mode in terms of like when you detect certain chords or chord progression, you can build what are known as patterns. So from there you can go about editing the said patterns. Like you can change the octave of certain chords when they're hit in the pattern. You can apply an inversion of the chord, or you can look at the semitones. So even more reason why I think this can help producers, when they're using this tool, create a very top level of a humanized effect. Then you have the actual chords using the circle of fifth chord chart reference. Pad, I haven't really explored, but this refers to, I think, each of the chord progressions, and you can trigger these with MIDI notes. So for example, you can assign a key and it'll trigger, for example, C minor here over 11. So pretty cool. And then you have mods here as well. So again, you could dive real deep into this thing, but in terms of the layout, it's pretty much these are the settings, and then down on this row you have detect mode, which I'm going to show you shortly with the audio mode, and then once it detects things, it shows what patterns you want to come up with. So I think all in all, this is pretty cool. The layout is not too complicated after you use it a couple of times and familiarize yourself with the product. All right, so point number 2, let's talk about my workflow in terms of how I would leverage this product. So being a sample-based heavy producer, what I would typically do is, let me just solo out my Serato sample. I'd have my sample here, and you can see by the MIDI notes it's 2 chops, so I played with it on my machine pads here as I made it a MIDI controller, and from there I just bounced that out to get this. So the pure audio file of whatever I chopped in my samples. So typically when I'm making music, I want it to sound as rich and organic and soulful as possible. So that requires a deep presence of a human element. So now that I got the audio file for whatever I chopped in Serato Sample, I just move over to Scalar 2, open this up. My detection is audio, but it's going to be a specific file. So I'll go over here to my sampling hard drive, samples, house is the folder, chords for Staying on My Mind, which is the name of the project. This will replace your current detection, and the answer is yes. And here we go. It gave me the actual chord progression of what was in the sample I chopped. So this, I just want to pause here for a moment. This is a huge fucking deal, because the amount of times I've been making music and I found a record and I was like, man, if I could just remove the voice and play the chords alone, or get somebody to play the chords in the exact same way, I don't even have to hire a musician to do this. I have the chord structure here in a manner that the wave file was telling Scalar 2 how it's played. So let's just listen to the chord progression. That's exactly it. So now that we have that chord progression, what we then can do is say, from a MIDI perspective, I'm not going to click this because I've already done it, but you could literally say, hey, capture, actually I think it should be good. Let me see if I can get it out as an example. It should work. So you could say MIDI capture, it's now ready to record MIDI, play, stop, and then you go over here, drag it into the project, and those are the chords. It's crazy. This is so amazing to me, because the amount of times, since I've been producing music, and I'll clear that piece, we've dreamt about having a product like this. So let's listen to what it did. This is what I eventually went with, so I'm just going to play this along with the beat. And I'm going to solo out the chords. And now that I have the chords, I was able to say, you know what, why don't I make, a MIDI chop where it's an octave higher. So I just highlighted all of these notes in here. Let me just zoom in just so you can see it. I highlighted all of these notes and I just moved it up an octave into this MIDI clip. So let's listen to the playback of that. Crazy, right? And let's go over to what the MIDI capture did. A little off at the end there because I cut it off, but the shit is accurate, man. And this is the beauty of this product. I think this is the most powerful piece about this product, because now that you have the chord progression here, you can now start to make it your own and start to say, okay, well, maybe I'm gonna make some different variations of that chord progression. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to drag that first chord in there, and what I'm going to do with this one is say, okay, I'm going to put it in here, but maybe I could get like a different version of that, you know? So let me highlight that. So we look at ninths, and we get all of these different options now, you know? So playing it back, like, it's just creatively, it's just crazy to me, because you don't have to be this ace musician. Not that I think that this will replace very good musicians, because, you know, if anything that this product highlights is just how much more we should respect people in their craft if they are full-blown musicians and read music and can play all of these things that we're talking about. But as a producer that, you know, can kind of get away with stuff by playing by ear and figuring things out, like High, Live, and Dirty, that chord progression, that took me like an hour to figure out on my own. And that's just because I grew up in a household with someone who was classically trained, namely being my father, where I can hear, okay, these are where the notes are. This thing just expedites it and allows me to just be more creative and not necessarily overthink things. But if I have a genuine interest to dive in more into music theory, I can now understand things at a much deeper level. But this is definitely my workflow as a result of this product and the ability that it gives me. All right, and point number 3, this is a realistic example that I've come across many a time when I'm fooling around and I do something on the keyboard and I'm like, man, what did I play or what did they play? I can now answer those questions with this product. So I'm going to go back into the mode of using this as a MIDI effect. And here we have, you know, same layout, but it's just being leveraged as a MIDI effect. And you can see I don't have the options for the instruments. This is pure MIDI right now. So for example, I have a very, you know, Fred Falke like chord progression here that I will play because I was messing around with this. Very much Fred Falke. If you're not familiar with Fred's music, look him up. I believe I have a picture with him. I'll try and get it for this video and post it up. But Fred Falke, super dope producer. I believe he's German, and at the time he was living in the UK, and he put out a lot of great music, and he would play his sets live with bass and Ableton. Really cool stuff. So that's the chord progression. So I could be like, damn, what did I just play there? I have no idea. So I could come and take these MIDI notes and just say, okay, Scalar 2, show me the chords that are attached to this chord progression. So it's in MIDI. I've moved the MIDI notes into the lane where I have Scalar 2 as a MIDI effect. So what I'm going to do now is say, yeah, and I think if I just play it, and there it is. It gives me the full chord progression of what I played, and now I can do a bunch of different things in terms of different options to mess with these chords. But as a person that doesn't, you know, read music, or I'm not well versed in music theory, it is refreshing to me to now understand, okay, this is what I'm doing. These are the types of keys and chord structures I'm attracted to. And when I start highlighting, okay, I want to make some variations on this stuff, I can now dive in and know what they are, and they're documented as well. So this thing really fascinates me. And moreover, you know, leading to my next point in terms of point number 4, I think you absolutely have to maximize this product to its full capability to enhance your workflow very well. And I think leading to that you know, if I were to conclude things here in point number 5, it's just the fact that there's now no excuse for music being out of key, just bad music, not getting inspired. If anything, I think this allows people to just focus on creating and just getting the best out of their music from wherever the source of inspiration, you know, be it a vinyl record, whatever you happen to play serendipitously on a keyboard, or, you know, something you heard from an old WAV file, you can pick that up and just run with the idea. So I think this is absolutely amazing, but I hope the peek into my workflow will give you a sense of the possibilities with this tool. I'm just scratching the surface, I'm sure of that, and I know there's just a lot more to discover. Let me know your thoughts on this one. I usually join a conversation within 48 hours of posting these videos, so I'd love to hear what you got to say about this, and don't hesitate to join our Discord community. It's growing, it's over 300 plus members, and it's a lot of people, like-minded people, who are aspiring to make the best out of their craft, whether it's in DJing and production. Much love and respect to you. Peace.